This is one dog. One whole dog. You want one whole dog? How much worth? How much worth? What is up, guys? So today we are back talking a little bit more about regionals. So I think this will be the kind of like the final little video that I do on regionals for a bit. I don't really see there being too much more to like really look into. Of course, I could do like deep dives on certain things, but I felt like this video was a little bit more necessary based on a couple of questions that I was getting here and there in the Discord. Mainly, I had somebody bring this topic up and I was like, this would be kind of interesting to research. So basically the question that was proposed was, is there a Blaziken type Pokemon for regionals as he played a role in the Kingdom Cup? Meaning, is there a Pokemon that can counter the two kings, so to be, of the regionals, being Medicham and Azumarill? And I got to digging through my spreadsheet, the one that's obviously linked in the description, and I got to really look at like 5 different Pokemon that actually have a pretty decent chance at being able to counter both Medicham and Azumarill. So I started doing a little digging. So this is where I started. Basically, I took Medicham and Azumarill, and I took what they were both weak against and what they end up both resisting. Medicham being both fighting and psychic, he actually has a weakness to fairy, flying, and ghost. Pretty strong considering he only has 3 weaknesses there. Although he only does have 2 resistances, being fighting and rock. Azumarill, on the other hand, being a fairy and water typing, is only actually weak to electric, grass, and poison. But we do have a slew of resistances here. Bug, dark, dragon, fighting, fire, ice, and water all are big resistances for us. So the one big thing that I saw was there's no common weakness, unfortunately, but fighting actually does show up on both Pokemon. Unfortunately, that means that a lot of the fighting types that could have been candidates, I just kind of left a lot of them out, considering that both Pokemon are going to resist that fighting type damage. I just kind of like shooed them under the rug for now. But I did come up with 5 Pokemon that I do think deserve a little light shedded on them, just for this exact reason, that they can counter both Azumarill and Medicham in most shield situations. There are a couple of caveats here, so let's actually look at those. So our first counter here is actually Alolan Raichu. Spark, Wild Charge, and Thunder Punch was the moveset that I used for this. And you can see, so we have a 0 versus 0, 1 versus 1, and 2 versus 2 shield situations here. So they're all lined up. Medicham is the first column and Azumarill is the second column here. And you can see that Alolan Raichu wins the 0 versus 0 in both scenarios. We actually win the 1v1 in both scenarios. But we actually end up tying in this Medicham matchup, which is awkward to say the least. I mean, that's kind of weird, but we do still end up winning the Azumarill matchup though, which is pretty nice. So if you by chance have the Alolan Raichu, I don't know, from the Nightmare Cup, then hey, you pretty much have a decent counter to both Medicham and to Azumarill. So kind of some cost savings there if you're looking for a Pokemon that does both. Next, we can move on to Beedrill. So Beedrill, having Poison Jab, Aerial Ace, and Sludge Bomb here, actually does really well. So wins both of the 0 versus 0, wins both of the 1v1s, and wins both of the 2v2s. Which is really cool. Now, to drill a little bit deeper into the numbers, the 0 versus 0 matchup is our closest matchup for what seems like both of those. The 1v1 is our easiest matchup. We do survive with the most health in the 1v1. And then in the 2v2, we do slide back just a little bit, and we end up doing a little bit worse in remaining health than we would in the 1v1. But needless to say, we actually win in all 3 scenarios for both Pokemon. Next, let's move on to Haunter, which I feel like a lot of people are paying attention to. Haunter is a good candidate for this scenario, actually. Shadow Claw, Sludge Bomb, and Sucker Punch end up being the moveset that I used here. We actually win the Medicham matchup in the 0 versus 0, but we end up tying in the Azumarill matchup, which is awkward. But once you factor in more shields, we actually end up winning all of the remaining scenarios. The 1v1 and the 2v2s are no problem for Haunter there. So pretty good. Now, here again, it does kind of get a little weird because in the 1v1, we do end up winning with more health remaining rather than in the 2v2. But you can kind of just imagine that a lot of that is based on if we get to a 2v2 shield situation, both Pokemon are in the match longer, which ends up meaning more fast attacks connect, and then, you know, that whole spiel. So while we don't end with as much health, we still end up winning. Next, let's actually talk about Muck here. So Poison Jab, Gunk Shot, and Thunder Punch was the actual moveset that we used here. So we actually can win the 0 versus 0, both Pokemon, 1 versus 1, both Pokemon, and the 2v2 with both Pokemon there. Pretty easy. So it does start to have a little bit of an issue with Medicham. It's definitely weighted a little bit more towards the Azumarill matchup, although it does do just fine in the Medicham matchup. But having access to a poison move and an electric move kind of starts to exploit some weakness that we have over here for Azumarill. So then we're actually going to move into Tentacruel, which of course we talked about yesterday just a little bit. Poison Jab, Sludge Wave, and I just kind of threw on Blizzard, but it didn't really end up using Blizzard, hardly ever. So we do end up winning the 0 versus 0 for both Pokemon, the 1v1 for both Pokemon, but we actually end up losing this Medicham matchup with 2 shields, and we kind of lose it pretty difficult. So I did try to take several different scenarios and try to switch around some of the shields, like maybe if I don't shield the first 2 power-up punches from Medicham, maybe if I try to not even shield the 3rd one, you know, how long can I make this Tentacruel last? And unfortunately what ends up happening in this scenario is that Counter just straight up outpaces Poison Jab to the point where Poison Jab just can't get enough damage through, so Counter ends up building so much more damage up just simply because of the power-up punches adding on that compound damage, and then we just end up slowly losing there. Kind of interesting that these 5 Pokemon do actually have some sort of place with a anti-meta type team, because even though Haunter is like considered one of the meta picks that we've been talking about, he is part of that top 23, these other 4 really aren't, and it's kind of interesting because all 5 of these Pokemon can actually do pretty well up against the 2 most preferred Pokemon in the cup. At least that's the way it seems. So I definitely think that if you're looking for an out to both of these Pokemon, definitely give some attention to these 5 candidates and kind of see which ones fit your team the best. Like obviously, if you're already running Azumarill, maybe Muck would make more sense than Tentacruel for you so you don't expose a huge grass weakness there. If you're already running Frostlass, then maybe Haunter doesn't make as much sense, but Beedrill would. You know, just stuff like that so that you don't expose yourself to too much weakness all at once, but still having a really nice answer to both of the top Pokemon in the cup. So that is actually going to be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for all of your feedback from the meta videos that we've actually been doing. I have started to build my team for the regionals, but I have yet to practice with it or anything like that. Honestly, after doing this research today, I really want to look into Beedrill myself. I think Beedrill would be a very interesting Pokemon to take, and I definitely think that he could be quite fun to use in a cup that, I don't know, it's very cool. I think Beedrill is very neat. Muck would be kind of hard to obtain for me. I don't see too many Grimers, and not that, honestly, that enticing for me. Haunter, it's going to be nearly impossible unless I spend a ton of dust on a Ghastly. Tentacruel, I've just never really been a big fan of Tentacruel. And Alolan Raichu, worst case scenario, I could end up just using Alolan Raichu since I already do have one for the Nightmare Cup powered up. So I definitely want to look into Beedrill, but I definitely think Alolan Raichu would be another good candidate for me to try on my team at least. Let me know what you guys think of these 5 counters. Do you think that any of them are actually viable? I mean, what do you guys think of these 5 Pokemon? Did you expect these 5 Pokemon? Because I sure didn't. So thank you guys so much for hanging out. Remember, if you like to like videos, make sure you do that. If you don't, you can be that guy. And otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in those comments below. And until our next video, I will catch you then.